So thank you very much for this invitation and this requirement for me to sit down and really meditate more fully than I would normally do for Sunday Gospel. I have enjoyed thinking about this and writing a short meditation. The journey narrative in Luke is coming to a close this Sunday. Since the Sunday of June 26th, the 13th Sunday of the year, we have been traveling with Jesus toward Jerusalem. If you recall, that gospel opened with, "Then Jesus set his face," a very ancient Akkadian expression. He set his face toward Jerusalem. Next Sunday, Jesus will be in Jerusalem. And the entry of the city into the city is, of course, omitted and is celebrated on Palm Sunday. The story of Zacchaeus presents two key themes in the Gospel of Luke: money and hospitality. How we deal with money, how we discuss our family economies, our community economies, and how we handle money personally. These are fundamental questions in the Lucan Gospel. The money theme that is critical to the story of Zacchaeus comes to a dramatic conclusion in Acts chapter 5. And here I show you a slide of the death of Ananias. Acts chapter 5, as you know, is the story of the financial holdings of Ananias and Sapphira. Just a brief reminder of the stories because it is so critical to understanding the text for tomorrow. Ananias and Sapphira sell a piece of property and pretend to turn in all the proceeds to the Christian community. Their crime is not that they didn't turn everything in, but that they pretended to turn everything in when in fact they kept back a part for themselves. Peter points this out to each one of them just before they die. And there you see in St. Peter's the mosaic of Sapphira dying, and I have blown up in the background the death of Ananias, who is off being buried. Of course, the famous line in the text, "The feet that carried out your husband, Sapphira, will carry you out." Again, their crime is not keeping back part of the proceeds. Their crime is lying to the community and pretending to have turned it all in. This story is never read in church, which is to me quite scandalous. Here I show you the list of readings from the lectionary, from the Acts of the Apostles. The text should be read here between Acts 4 and Acts 5, and here is a larger image so you can actually see Acts 4 ends 32 to 35, the story of Barnabas, and then Sapphira and Ananias, which should be Acts 1, chapter 5, 1 to 11, is omitted so that it is never read. The decision to skip this passage and not present it in the lectionary should cause us deep reflection, since it is the most important Lucan text and concludes the money theme that is important in the Zacchaeus account. This New Testament scene is presented in St. Peter's. This mosaic appears directly across from the exit from the sacristy. The sacristy, of course, is the place where business is conducted in a church. Thus, the priest walking out of the sacristy to celebrate Mass stands before this mosaic. They have received some kind of offering to celebrate this Mass, and so they look at Sapphira at the moment of her death, and the question of money stares them in the face just as they are about to celebrate the Eucharist. And here, let me show you the actual scene from St. Peter's so you can see what I am referring to. Here we are in St. Peter's, and we're turning around. And over here, you see the exit from the sacristy. And on this side, you will see the painting of Sapphira and her death. So I'll stop it here. The videographer never turns to this mosaic, most likely because he doesn't understand what it is. Most people think it's Jesus casting 7 demons out of Mary Magdalene. It is not. It is the death of Sapphira. And you see there the sacristy. In fact, a priest is just about to come out to begin celebrating Mass. So he comes out that door and he looks directly at this mosaic. So there you see him coming out. And getting ready to say Mass, having stood in front of the death of Sapphira and the question of money. So many texts in the Lucan story are about money. We begin the gospel when the crowds ask John the Baptist, "What should we do?" In reply, he says to them, "Whoever has 2 coats must share with anyone who has none." So just think about that for a moment with Zacchaeus. I will give half of what I have to the poor. So immediately at the beginning of the gospel, if we have 2 coats, we have to give one away. So I have to ask ourselves, we can go look in our closets right now, just wait for me to finish, and see if you have 2 coats. If you have 2 coats, as I do, you are not a Lucan Christian. Then the tax collectors say, what should we do? Again, think of Zacchaeus again. Huh? Zacchaeus, what should we do? Collect no more than the amount prescribed. And then soldiers ask, what should we do? And of course, he says, be content with your pay. There is nothing more dangerous than an army that has not been paid. Texts about money are central in the Gospel of Luke. Here, one of my favorite paintings of David Tenier's The Rich Man Being Brought into Hell, the parable of the rich man and Lazarus. There is the very mysterious text about the unjust steward. After the unjust steward, there follows 7 different attempts to interpret this very mysterious parable or allegory. In rabbinic tradition, in the Talmud always has a discussion about the meaning of a biblical text. And the Talmud's final interpretation of a biblical text is the opinion of the Babylonian or Jerusalem Talmud. And so you see, if you go back and read that text, there's, again, 7 interpretations. And the very last interpretation is the opinion of the gospel of the Lucan community behind the Gospel of Luke. You cannot serve both God and wealth. Money underscores so many texts. The Good Samaritan, which is often we think of it ending when the Samaritan takes the wounded person to the hotel, but it does not end there for Luke. He took out 2 denarii. Luke, with this very vivid image, naming the specific amount, reminding us how focused he is on money. The Good Samaritan, give me the share of property that belongs to me. And so he divided his property among them. If you read Luke with an eye on money, you will see that almost every passage has something to do with economics, whether it's the parable of the widow seeking justice from a few weeks ago, or the raising of the widow's son. But last Sunday's gospel is particularly important, again, on the question of money. The Pharisee, standing by himself, was praying and saying, I thank God I am not like these other thieves and rogues and adulterers, or this tax collector. I fast twice a week and I give 1/10 of all my income. So you can hear already, Luke is already preparing us for what Zacchaeus is about to say. To be a Lucan Christian is to be conscious of how we spend our money, personal finances, and the distribution of wealth in society. Now, as religious, we often talk a lot about the distribution of wealth in society, when in fact, in my case, some of our own communities do not have transparency where money is concerned. If that is the case, the judgment of Ananias and Sapphira falls upon us. In the Lucan worldview, there is no distinction between religion on Sunday and what I do on Monday. In fact, in the Zacchaeus story, what we do on Monday is more important than what we do on Sunday when it comes to the question of finances. So now we come to the Zacchaeus story. I hope I've given you a context of Luke Acts so that you're able to understand the critical importance of this text. First of all, the journey narrative is over. Jesus has reached Jericho. It is now a few-hour walk up to Jerusalem, a difficult walk uphill that I was able to do at a younger age. Luke starts out by describing the scene as Jesus passing through Jericho. This often happens in the Gospels. Recall the call of Matthew in Matthew chapter 9, verse 1. Jesus was passing by when he saw Matthew sitting in the tax booth. Recall the Emmaus story when Jesus pretends to be going on ahead and Cleopas, his companion, insists that he stop with them. We'll return to the Emmaus story in a moment. So Luke gives us the impression that Jesus is not planning to stop in Jericho. Again, this picks up the hospitality theme. If Jesus is going to stop in Jericho, someone is going to have to stop him. Otherwise, he is simply going to pass through what is a very tiny town. Luke also gives us the name of the character, Zacchaeus. We have to observe when he gives us the name of a person. The tax collector last Sunday was nameless, as was the Pharisee. Luke names Zacchaeus because his name comes from the Aramaic root Zakkai, meaning innocent or pure. But here, I think it should be interpreted as an Aramaic passive participle nominalized with the sense acquitted or absolved in the context of a court proceeding. That means that in the original Aramaic story, the hearer hears the name Zacchaeus and then listens to how his name is about to be fulfilled in the story. Zacchaeus is about to be declared, as his name says, absolved or acquitted. We are told that he is a tax collector. Now, there is a great deal of historical critical information about this character in first century Roman Palestine, but I'm not sure that's really that important to us. Within the world of the text itself, John the Baptist tells the tax collectors, collect no more than the amount prescribed for you. This suggests in the world of the text that tax collectors made their income by prescribing more than what was required in the Roman tax. We know then from the world of the text that these tax collectors and Zacchaeus, a chief tax collector, collected more than was required. Even more simply, we are simply dealing with government money. And just like today, where we have corruption in government spending, so there was corruption in the ancient world. We hardly need to be surprised that a person dealing in government money would be at risk of acting corruptly. Here in Italy, everyone is trying to avoid the value-added tax, which runs between 18 and 22%, depending on the item. Of course, Luke also suggests that Zacchaeus has been acting corruptly by telling us he was rich. The meaning of the word rich in the Gospel of Luke falls upon Zacchaeus. This word appears some 13 times in the Gospel of Luke. I'm not going to read them for you, just so you can see when Luke pronounces on Zacchaeus as rich. This is a term that we have been hearing often in the gospel. And you can see how often Luke mentions it, how deeply he is concerned with money. Zacchaeus is made to look ridiculous by having to run to see Jesus because he is so short, and then climbing a sycamore tree in order to get a glance at our Lord. All of this suggests his investment in wanting to see Jesus. When Jesus came to the place, he looked up and said to Zacchaeus, "Hurry down, for I must stay at your house today." This is a crucial text of welcoming Jesus into our home. Up to this point in the gospel, the meals with Jesus have been disasters. The first major meal is in Luke 7, in the house of Simon the Pharisee. I entered your house, you gave me no water for my feet, but she has bathed my feet. You gave me no kiss, but from the time I came in, she has not stopped kissing my feet. The meal in the house of Martha and Mary. And while we try to baptize and redeem Martha, that's not in the text. The Lord answered her, Martha and Martha, you're just fretting about. Luke 14, Jesus in the house of the leader of the Pharisee. Jesus notices how people are jockeying for position to sit at the table. This is a very powerful comment. We know from the work of Victor Turner that meals are critical moments when social location and social stratification become apparent. Certainly, I know this well, living in the city of Rome. Jesus notices this social stratification at mealtime and points it out as it is happening. Jesus is a very difficult dinner guest. Finally, on the road to Emmaus, Jesus gets welcomed properly, where they insist that he stay, and they set him at the head of the table in order to break bread with them. Now we come to the moment when Zacchaeus encounters Jesus. But what is important to notice, in contrast to the Emmaus story, is that Jesus has invited himself. Zacchaeus did not invite him, like Cleopas and his companion, but we will see Zacchaeus knows how to welcome him. The critical moment of proper welcome of Jesus comes only at the end of the gospel in the road to Emmaus, but Zacchaeus does a wonderful job of welcoming him. We are now at the moment of welcome that precedes, in the Zacchaeus story, we are at the moment of welcome that precedes the climactic event of the road to Emmaus. Zacchaeus knows how to welcome Jesus, even though Jesus is self-invited. The gospel writers allow us into the hearts of those who see the event. Almost naturally, they are scandalized by the fact that Jesus enters the home of someone who continually rips them off in tax collecting. I can understand their point of view. They see only the external scene of Jesus entering the house of Zacchaeus, but the narrator brings us inside the house so that we can see the fullness of what happened. Perhaps we could say that the people outside the house were really just gossiping, and we know how destructive and damaging gossip is in the life of a community. Zacchaeus' statement at the beginning, says he will give up half his possessions. This then statement forms an inclusion with what we read in John the Baptist's statement to those who asked what to do. The 4-time repayment, according to Zacchaeus, is not what is required according to Leviticus. So Zacchaeus is doing much more than what is required. Leviticus 6 teaches that when you have sinned or realize your guilt and would restore what you took by robbery or fraud or deposit that was committed to you, or lost the thing that you found, or anything else about which you have sworn falsely, you shall repay the principal and add 1/5 to it. Zacchaeus' response is much greater than the 1/5. But what is extremely important is that Zacchaeus' response to Jesus is in pure economic terms. It is not about religious observance. Zacchaeus does not welcome Jesus saying, I will make sure I'm on time for the synagogue, and I will make sure my phylacteries are the proper length, and I will make sure that I say the Shema 7 times every day. I will give half of what I have to the poor, and I will pay back anyone defrauded 4 times. Jesus responds, today salvation has come to this house. And he claims him as a child of Abraham, reclaiming him for the community. Zacchaeus has returned to full membership within the community. His name has been fulfilled. He has been acquitted. I close with a citation from our Carmelite rule. Our rule cites the Acts of the Apostles, the text of Acts 4:32-35, a text just prior to Ananias and Sapphira's story. And here you can see in the Latin text, highlighted in yellow, how much has been borrowed from the passage in Acts. And there you can see it in English. Our rule, let no brother or sister say that anything is their own, but let everything be held in common from what the Lord has given you. Let it be distributed to each through the prioress, taking into account the age and necessities of each. This Sunday, as you can see, as Carmelite life from our rule is meant to reflect Lucan economics. This Sunday, the Lucan journey comes to a close. We are at the doorstep of Jerusalem, a 3-hour walk uphill from Jericho. Themes of hospitality and money are coming to a climax. Money in Acts 5, Ananias and Sapphira, and hospitality in the scene on the road to Emmaus. Zacchaeus represents the penultimate moment when we have the opportunity to become Lucan Christians, welcoming Jesus into our home and showing him our bank accounts.